Hello, Mr. Rohit Vyas. Welcome again to ITV Gold. Thank you for giving us your time today.
Thank you very much for having me on again.
Of course, there's a lot happening in the nation, and today I was supposed to ask you about this big incident that happened last week, but unfortunately, I have to ask you about even another incident that happened yesterday, so let's dig right into it. I'm talking about the shooting that took place in Boulder, Colorado. 10 people dead, including a police officer. The gunman opened fire at a grocery store, and currently we do not know the motive behind this shooting. This is happening less than 1 week after the Atlanta shooting at the spas, which killed 8 people, 6 of those who were Asian American. So before we go anywhere into this conversation, discuss what its impact is, my first question to you is, do we or do we not have a problem of gun violence in this country right now?
The answer is obvious. We have a serious problem of gun violence. We've had it since the assassination of President John F. Kennedy back in the 60s, and subsequently his brother, the Attorney General at the time, Robert Kennedy, and many people after that, and many things would manifested themselves into mass shootings, such as at high schools, grocery stores, theaters, things like that. This has been going on far too long, and there is an endemic problem in society here involving gun violence. It's also indicative of the mental stability of many in society, something we need to look at very seriously, especially in light of this past year of cabin fever enforced by the pandemic around the world. There are people who have not been able to handle it, and we don't know what the motive was in the very latest shooting right now. It's being investigated, but all of this is coming together to a boiling point where we're going to have to figure out in society, do we really need so many guns, especially assault weapons, the type that was used in the Colorado shooting in the latest incident? Do we need things like this? Do we need to enforce a ban on guns altogether? What we need to do legislatively, it's being discussed right now. Ironically, Ted Cruz of Texas, who was speaking about this in the Senate, took the side of gun owners, not surprisingly. And the gun owners assert that it's not the gun owners themselves, it's not the weapon itself, but the person who uses that weapon. That is the issue, and that is the problem, which is true. But the problem is when you have the easy availability of weapons such as assault rifles, then who do you blame? Do you blame the fact that it's available easily, coupled with the mental stability of someone or the mental frame of someone who's intending to use it? What do you do? This needs to be examined very urgently in society.
And let me ask you, the Second Amendment is so important to all these gun owners, but is it worth taking a human's life? Why do we not have stronger background checks? Why is mental health not considered when somebody's given a weapon?
And that's exactly what President Joe Biden said today to reporters during a very brief interaction with reporters in a question and answer session, where he said precisely we've got to look at the loopholes into background checks. There are apparently plenty of them. People manage to get through those loopholes. They should not be owning guns. They should not be out there buying guns, and yet they manage to get their hands on them. There are many people who manufacture them illegally. Every single gun has to have a serial number so that it's traceable. Every bullet that's used has to have a number so that it's traceable, et cetera, et cetera. But there are loopholes, and many of these weapons don't have it. And background checks, very important. That's why I talked about mental stability, mental frame of mind. You've got to find out if somebody is mentally able to handle owning a weapon. And for what purpose? To what purpose? Is it for sport, which is what ostensibly many of them say, for hunting, things like that? Or is it just to keep it for the sake of holding the privilege of holding a weapon? I would be very afraid of that if someone wants it just for the privilege of owning a gun, because you never know what can happen to you later in life, or even early enough in life, where you might suddenly lose your mental balance and decide, okay, I have this weapon, I want to use it, I'm upset with someone. There are a lot of things to be thought about very, very carefully in this matter.
Right. This was the 7th shoot in the past 7 days of mass shootings. The last administration also saw a lot of mass shootings. Do you think President Trump is to be blamed for his support for the guns for some of this?
I think legislators, politicians are all to be blamed, from all parties, from everywhere. They are to be blamed for this situation. It's been for decades. It's not something new. President Trump is just one individual who's spoken out in his favor. But any number of politicians from all sides of the aisle have supported owning weapons, have done nothing about gun control over the years, despite the escalating violence involving guns and weapons. Nobody's done anything, and much of that was to be blamed on the lobbyists, the gun lobby. Extremely strong. Everybody in the gun lobby industry has a vested interest in not having any restrictions on the ownership of guns. And it's just every single leader that is responsible, not just one, but every one of them. And I think President Joe Biden, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, today have taken some important steps in trying to see what they can do. As long as the Democrats have a majority in the House of Representatives and at least a 50-50 divide in the Senate, if they can do something to finally bring some kind of order on this issue.
Right. We can certainly say that there are certain groups who are truly obsessed with the Second Amendment. They really want these guns. Have you ever thought about why, owning a gun is so important even now, even when we've seen so many mass shootings because of it?
It goes back to the Second Amendment, which is the basic right to own guns, and it goes back. Well, that was something that was drafted in the early days of the Republic and the early days of the Constitution being written and formed, etc., and put into law, as it were. And much of that had to do with everybody owning weapons at that time. There was a civil war. There were the Southerners, there were the Northerners, you had the British, you had the French, all kinds of things happening at that time. Weapons were very much an integral part of soldierhood, defending your territory and that type of thing. I believe it's outdated, and I think we have to rethink in the modern world of where we draw the line. Certainly assault weapons. Why would a normal person want an assault rifle? It makes absolutely no sense to me. I've spoken to gun owners, and some of them own assault rifles, and I've asked them that question. I said, why would you want an assault rifle? Oh, it's just fun. It's great to hold. But why is it great fun to hold an assault rifle and use it? Where do you use it? If you don't use it to hurt someone or a living creature, where do you use it? Oh, in sport. You go out there and just fire at a range or whatever. And some people claim they get a kick out of doing that, and therefore they have the right to own such weapons. I personally am I am all for strict gun control laws. I know it's not a popular stance to take, but that's my own opinion. It doesn't mean everybody else should follow what I say, but that's my own opinion. And I don't know if we can change that thinking. However, if there is some kind of a compromise where we say, okay, a certain number of weapons which have far-reaching consequences in terms of the grievous injuries they can cause, the fatalities and things like that, we need to rein those in. I think that would be a good start, at least to get the conversation going.
Right. Let's now talk about the other shooting from last week, a shooting which was done at the spas, which were owned by Asian Americans in Georgia. 8 were killed, 6 of them were Asian American women. Now, the police has said that the suspect, Robert Long, age 21, said that he had a sex addiction, and that was his way of eliminating whatever issue he was going through.
Right,
but it's very, very, very visible that this was an Asian American owned businesses. There were Asian Americans working there. So my question to you is, as an Asian American yourself, how does that make you feel?
Very afraid, very, very cautious, very, it's reflective of a very dangerous xenophobia in society that has developed. And by the way, it's not just here in the United States, it's around the world. Asians are being all of a sudden targeted, especially because of the pandemic, where many people believe it emanated from China, and therefore China and Chinese people are somehow responsible. That's the thinking in a lot of people's minds. And that's totally wrong type of thinking, obviously, even though it originated in Wuhan, according to all estimates. It does not mean Chinese were responsible, or anybody who's Chinese. And I think it reflects the xenophobia. Someone's trying to find fault. Where did this start? Where did it happen? And they're going after it. However, the Atlanta shootings and the Atlanta vicinity shootings that took place, Police are still working on that. The FBI is working on that, others, to determine if indeed what the perpetrator said is true, that it was merely his targeting, victims because of what he called his sex addiction and is blaming them for that sex addiction. Or was there something more sinister? And was that a cover for actually a deep-rooted hatred or misgiving for someone who was Asian? They are looking into that. It's a little early to be speculating. It seems obvious as of now because 6 young Asian women were targeted. And among others, there were a total of 8 victims. So on the surface of it, it seems to be targeting Asians. But on the other hand, investigations have to play themselves out before we can make a final determination and get the final call from law enforcement officials.
People have taken it to the streets. They're protesting. And the biggest topic that they're protesting against is racism and misogyny. How much of that do you see in what happened?
Plenty of it. You can see plenty of it. And that's the whole problem with society now, is that people have become intolerant of each other, have become unforgiving of each other, even though, there's nobody to really blame. But, it's also part of human nature. This is why I talked about mental health, very, very important issue. If you're dissatisfied with your style of, if you're dissatisfied with what's happening in your life, whether it's your employment, your career, your personal life, whatever, you tend to, if you're a weaker human being or someone who feels they need to find someone to blame, you tend to look for someone to blame. And it's all the more hurtful if you think it's someone who looks alien or who seems alien or speaks alien than you do in your particular society, and to go after them and blame them. It's a mental issue. And therefore, we're now going to have to deal with a very big problem with folks and mental stability, not just here, but around the world. And I think it's been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic situation worldwide.
Right. Anti-Asian American hate crimes have doubled during this pandemic. And as you just see, we have a situation here that happened in Georgia. How much of that do you blame on the previous administration, from a president who used to call it the China virus?
That had a lot to do with it, obviously. I mean, when you start going out there and openly calling it China virus, that's not something a president should be saying. A president is supposed to be the supreme healer in chief, not the supreme instigator in chief. So to just put that bluntly, I wouldn't expect any president of the United States to be talking like that. But that was Donald Trump's style. However, he didn't look to the consequences of something like that, because when you speak like that, your followers are going to start to think like that, believe in you, especially those who have faith in you. They're going to start believing and thinking that that's correct, and that's how everybody else should be thinking. A very dangerous precedent indeed. But I'm not going to just singularly blame him for what's been happening. Xenophobia has been building up in society for a long, long time. Every minority community in the United States has seen it, whether it's in relation to college admissions, in schools, at the workplace, and things like that. This has been going on for decades. It's been endemic. It's a disease that needs to be eradicated. Americans need to see themselves all as equal Americans, not Asian American, not Black American, not Hispanic American, all Americans. It doesn't matter what color or what ethnic origin you all are. You're an American, period. That's how we should all begin to think. And that's how a leader should be calling on people to think, is that we're all the same. We're Americans. We may look different, but we're all Americans. And that will start the healing process, in my opinion. But it's going to take time.
And just talking about leaders, I have to ask you, when you're looking at President Joe Biden right now and his administration, what do you think they need to do right now to tackle this issue and call for racial justice? Is he doing his job right so far?
I think he's doing a fantastic job, a splendid job. Don't forget, he had a very difficult time during the transition process, where they received little or no cooperation from the Trump administration going into their administration. This is still a very young administration. And once it reaches 100 days, we'll be able to give it a more accurate assessment. But my marks right now, full marks for Joe Biden. I think most of America agrees with that. He's done a great job. He has been doing everything he can to appease people and to keep saying, repeating to them, he's everyone's president, not just a president for Democrats or people who voted for him. But even people who didn't vote for him, Joe Biden continues to insist and ingrain in everyone that I'm everyone's president. So he's doing a superb job. He immediately spoke out on the gun violence. He spoke out immediately on the attacks against Asians. And he went over there. He planned to go over there and talk to the Asian American community, and he did that. A very good sign that he stepped right up to the plate. And he's doing everything he can as quickly as he can as these crises seem to multiply one after the other, not because of his doing, but because of all these years of pent-up fury.
Yeah, it's a conversation of years and years. The more we dig into it, the more racism we see. My final question to you has to be, we are South Asian American. We are a huge part of the API community. How do you think we should be allies for other Asian Americans? What does the brown community, according to you, need to do?
I think you absolutely have to be allies, because today it's the Far East Asians who are facing what they're facing now. It could be the South Asian community tomorrow. It could be the Indian community itself being targeted. Indeed, I have personally covered over the years as a journalist when Indians in the Northeast were being targeted outside temples and places of worship. It had nothing to do with Asians or South Asians or Latinos. It was simply Indians who were being targeted. So Indians have been victims before. Indians have been victims going back 100 years when they first arrived on these shores. So it's something we all have to be very, very aware of. Everybody needs to get into the act of protecting each other together. And that means the mainstream, the white community, the Latino community, the African American community, South Asian community, Indian specifically, the Chinese Americans, the Korean Americans, whoever. We've all got to team up and protect each other and protect society, protect our children from the influences that would tend to make them xenophobic. And that goes for the white American community as well. They need to be part of this movement, everybody together to change the thinking, to change the mentality. This was an old, archaic way of thinking, but we have a modern society now. We have new generations growing up. They shouldn't even be thinking of these things. These divides should not be coming into their psyche at all.
Yes, truly a sad case here. So many lives lost. Let's just hope there's something done for gun reform. Thank you again for your time on ITV Gold.
Thank you very much for having me on again.